Welcome to episode 30 of the Fave podcast, where I interview friends, family, and colleagues, talk about their background, get into the Fave topics of books, food, music, sports, and humor, and then we hear a couple of stories at the end, one from our guest and one that I will share. And pleased to have made it to the 30th episode, and with my guest today, Doug Kiel. Doug and I go way back. Doug, welcome to the Fave podcast.
Thanks, Dan. It's just really an honor to be included in this wonderful podcast series.
Well, thank you. Doug and I first met in 1965, so that would be 61 years ago when we were students at Tenafly Junior High School in Tenafly, New Jersey, in the seventh grade. So back then, junior high was just seventh and eighth grades, and we each had gone to different elementary schools in Tenafly, but we met and pretty quickly, I recall, became pretty good friends that year, so much so that when we had to go away, like for spring break, we'd miss each other. We'd come back, be happy to see each other. So that was probably a good start to junior high. And since then, over the years, we've had a few reunions that we've gone to. We really connected strongly again at the 40th reunion of our class. And then since that time, when we got a chance to spend the day together in Tenafly, walking around and having a lunch at the Tenafly Diner, we stayed in touch ever since. So, Doug, it's great to continue being friends with you. And let's start out by asking you, when and where were you born?
Yeah, 1953, the second day of that year, my mother gave birth to yours truly. And the story was that my father was hoping for a birth in 1952 so that he could save on taxes. Deduct me. He was ready to deduct me even before I was born, but I hung out another few days and emerged on January 2nd, 1953, in New York City. Doctor's Hospital is what it was called. I don't know if it's still there, but that's what I was told.
And what is your ancestry?
According to my parents, we had a fair amount of Eastern European ancestry, Austria, Hungary area of Europe, and then a very surprising entry into ancestry came when my mother, now deceased, found my grandmother, her mother's birth certificate, and did not know before finding this birth certificate that my grandmother was born in Russia and came to the United States, I guess, as a girl, young girl. So I'm second generation born in the US. And so I have Russian and Eastern Europe ancestry.
And after you were born in New York, did you live in Tenafly at that time?
No, my parents were living in Queens, specifically in Forest Hills. And, you don't remember too much before the age of maybe 3 or 4, but I do have some distinct memories of living in an apartment in Queens because one of the few outdoor activities that was available in the city was me riding my tricycle around a large square courtyard of the apartment building. And I remember that because I'd seen pictures of myself, and plus I actually did remember riding my bicycle. My mother dressed me up in these, I guess she thought, rather cute, stylish outfits, but anyone passing by would have said something like, "Wow, that is one nerdy looking little boy," at least by today's standards. I often had shorts with little suspenders and a matching hat as I was riding my bicycle, if you can imagine that.
You wrote in style.
Oh, yes.
And now, when did you leave Queens and where did you go next?
According to my parents, we moved to the country. 4 years later, in about 1957, we moved from Queens to the country, being New Jersey. We moved across the Hudson River, basically, and moved to Tenafly when I was about 4. And that was about the time that my one and only sibling was, he was born in New Jersey.
So where else have you lived since then?
Well, I spent all of my years in New Jersey through high school. Um, Always sorry that you had to depart prior to finishing your senior year, but we had many good years up till I left home to go to college, and where I attended Duke University in lovely Durham, North Carolina, the Deep South, as they called it. And I spent many years there in North Carolina.
And then where did you go after that?
Well, I stayed in North Carolina 10 or 12 years and then ended up moving up to New England after North Carolina and settled in the area that I currently live now, in the Boston metropolitan area. But there was a brief stopover in New Hampshire, in Hanover, New Hampshire, where Dartmouth College is located. I did some training there for my professional career before ending up in Boston.
Do you think of yourself as a Bostonian, a New Jerseyite, or a North Carolinian, or all of the above?
To some extent, all of the above, but I will say that being in New England for so many years and generating a lot of ire from our high school friends who call me a traitor for moving from New York sports teams to those in the Boston area. I have completely transitioned to a New Englander and a Boston sports fan.
When you were growing up, you mentioned you had a brother. So in your family of four, were there any extended family members around?
No, we were a pretty isolated unit of the family in New Jersey, but my grandparents, who were in New York, were the closest family members. So I had one set of parents in Brooklyn and another in Queens. My grandfather died when I was very young on my mother's side. So my grandmother in Queens was a frequent contact for us, visitor, and we went to her apartment. She lived with her sister. So I had an aunt and a grandmother who were roommates. And so we visited Queens a lot. My grandmother on my father's side lived in a house in Brooklyn, rented the upstairs to a rabbi and his family.
And what did your parents do?
My father was a an attorney, and he specialized in transportation law, which consisted of a lot of regulatory business surrounding the trucking industry. At the time, the government had the Interstate Commerce Commission, and it would regulate many aspects of commercial trucking. And he worked in New York City and commuted from New Jersey by bus and subway, where he was a master of folding the New York Times almost half of a page at a time, to so that you could sit on the bus or the subway reading, and then you would maneuver the newspaper so you could take up very little space. Because, and I know this because I used to work with him during the summer. I'd commute in an hour, hour and a half, depending on traffic, each direction. He worked in Lower Manhattan in the World Trade Center, in the smaller building, not the tall ones. So I would go in with him during the summer, serving as a secretary and doing a lot of clerical work. My mother was mostly a homemaker. She never finished college until we were grown up, and she went back and got her degree in fine arts at a local community college.
When you were young, what did you like to do?
Well, I think one of the qualities that followed me throughout my life, as you are aware, is the my interest in sports. So in high school, my year was soccer in the fall, basketball in the winter, and baseball in the spring. In the summer, I would go down in Tenafly and play summer basketball at the outdoor courts downtown. So sports dominated a lot of my early years and also into my adult years, going from player to spectator. Another another thing that I did was music. I played saxophone starting in elementary school and then junior high and into high school.
How about when you were real young? What did you like to do as a youngster?
Well, we, like many people in New Jersey, we went to the Jersey Shore for the summer. So we spent many memorable summers renting a house down at the shore with some local friends. And we would just have free reign of, running down to the beach and swimming and going to the boardwalk, sometimes Seaside Heights, some of the more popular areas on the Jersey Shore.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
Took me a while to figure that out. When I was in college, I began as a biology major, but it became apparent that as the years were passing, that I hadn't fulfilled all of the requirements for this major. And when I looked at my last year as a junior, I saw a schedule that was not diverse and completely science courses. And I figured this was my last chance to diversify my college background. And so I switched majors to a major called science education. I became interested in education and I took a couple courses and then I became a science education major, which reduced the number of science courses I needed to take. And I was able to take some education courses, music courses. I took a film course, and I was spent my spring semester as a senior, as a student teacher at the local Friends School, which is a Quaker school that combined junior high and high school into a large building where I taught a number of courses during my spring semester.
How
So
about when you were,
I
yeah,
ended up with this science background. And when I was about to graduate, I realized I didn't want to be a high school teacher, but I wasn't quite sure what I wanted. And I ended up applying to medical school because I was still very interested in science. And I didn't get into medical school, so I remained in North Carolina after graduation, took a couple extra courses to try to improve my record, and lived the good life in North Carolina. It was really fun. I made a lot of friends. I got a job as an orderly in the emergency room of Duke University Hospital, where I would be at the center of all the exciting acute emergency um, events that were happening in the Durham area. It was an exciting time.
when you were very young, did you remember what you wanted to be when you grew up then?
No, I really didn't. I didn't have any real thoughts of the future. I lived in the moment as we often did. didn't have the foresight to set up a radio station like you did, or but we were, I followed your progress, and we had a lot of memories um, carrying on in junior high. We were carefully disobedient and got into some small trouble in junior high, but kept it manageable.
Yeah, my wife Barbara said that had she known me in junior high, she would have nothing to do with me, having heard of what we were up to back then.
Yeah, that was a time.
You mentioned going to Duke. So how did you decide to go to Duke, and where else did you consider going?
Yes, Tenafly High School, I think it was 90+% of graduates went to college. So we were preordained as applying to college. So I think we typically would meet with our guidance counselor, and he or she would outline what kind of places we were eligible for. My parents, of course, pushed me for the upper echelons, and I didn't have a clue what would be the best fit for me. So I applied to a number of schools. I remember I did get into a group of places, Lafayette University in Pennsylvania, Lehigh University in Pennsylvania, University of Rochester, and Duke University. I was on the wait list at Princeton, and then was dropped along the way. So it was narrowed down to those four admitted those schools that I was admitted to, and I chose Duke, and the reasons were very flimsy, but it worked out for the best. I thought it was the more beautiful campus. That's an important thing. They had Division I sports that were very competitive. And when I went to Rochester, it was gray, raining, and very depressing. I remember ruling that one out. And Pennsylvania was in the running there. I think I might have ended up at Lafayette if I hadn't chosen Duke. And I'm very glad I went to Duke.
I think we have in common. I was also waitlisted at Princeton, so had we both gotten in there, maybe we would have been reunited.
Ah, I didn't even know that.
Um, so what did you think about Duke when you got there? Was it kind of as you had thought it was going to be? And you sound like you had a good time there.
Yeah, I really fell in love with the university because it was just a very beautiful part of the country, and the campus was outstanding. And I ended up um, walking on as a varsity soccer player, based on all those years of playing at Tenafly High School. I was able to make the team, and so I immediately had a group of friends from the soccer team, many upperclassmen, and I had a very all 4 years I played soccer, and that of course cemented my loyalty and dedication, I think, to Duke.
Did you try to walk on the basketball team as well?
No, but I did. We did have intramural teams. Duke had three intramural levels: the A League, the B League, and the C League. The first year I played on a team that enrolled in the A League, and I soon became aware that many of the players in the A League probably could have been starters at some smaller Division I colleges, and subsequently was in the B League. But it was fun. It was a very well developed intramural program.
Now you mentioned that you applied to med school and didn't get it initially, then and you worked as an orderly. Then did you reapply to med school, and where did you go?
I did reapply while working and taking some additional courses, and strike two, didn't get in the second time. This led to a bit of a panic, like, what am I going to do? And I actually applied for a PhD program, several programs, a PhD in microbiology, which I had become very interested in during college. and did some interviews, and then realized after I learned about the life of a doctoral student that I didn't really want to do a PhD. And I withdrew my applications and applied a third time. But I did a strategic maneuver, which was I moved permanently to North Carolina, abandoning my home state of New Jersey, which at the time, the ratio of applicants to medical school positions was one of the highest in the country. So I became a North Carolina resident by living there, paying taxes, getting a license, and I applied as an in-state resident. After going through a board of query from a group of older men who were savvy about people trying to switch their residency to get preferred status for school, but I got through the process and I was accepted very quickly into the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, which was a mere half-hour drive from Duke.
Now, had you applied there the previous two times, or had you applied different places?
I had not applied there because I was at the time a New Jersey resident, and the chance of getting in was quite slim.
Where had you originally applied to med school?
Everywhere and anywhere. After one failure, you send in quite a lot of applications.
I see. So did you feel a great sense of relief when you got accepted by North Carolina?
I was elated, to say the least, and I was so excited to begin school. I was one of the older students, having, worked for a couple years, and many of my classmates were directly out of college. A lot of them local North Carolinians. Had a lot of good friends and really enjoyed medical school. They were very sensitive about students becoming burned out and overworked, and they made a point of really keeping our lives well-rounded as we were in school. Our professors were absolutely the greatest, and the hospital experience was terrific. And I even in medical school got a chance to do my obstetrics training in England because there weren't enough deliveries for all the medical students to participate in. So our chairman had a lot of friends in England, and I ended up living in Nottingham, England, on the hospital campus where I did my obstetrics training. And that was an experience. I was a bit older than the medical students from England, so I hung out with some of the doctors. In fact, some of the doctors in training instead of the medical students. And it was such fun to be in England and just experience the cultural differences and get the British approach to delivering babies, which I delivered 11 British babies during my time in England. On a couple of occasions, I was invited over to the house of the family who had their new baby just to thank me for helping with the delivery. And I was always impressed with how, after the delivery was completed, the first thing was that the nurse would bring a platter with tea and sandwiches for the mother immediately after the delivery. And tea was a prominent part of living in the UK at the time. And when I would work in the outpatient department as a student, periodically during the day, the nurses would go around and say, Dr. Kiel, Mrs. Brown is here to see you. And that was the code word for a tea break in the back room. Mrs. Brown was the tea because they put the milk in the tea. So we would leave all of the patients in the rooms and we'd go and have tea and sandwiches in the middle of the afternoon. It was quite an experience.
I imagine you haven't experienced that since then.
No, no more Mrs. Browns.
When you ended up at North Carolina after having been an undergraduate at Duke, And then those are considerable rivals. What was that like?
It was a bit of a disturbance in my medical school class to have a former Dookie in the midst of all these North Carolinians, but people adjusted.
Now, you mentioned being an orderly. How long did your medical training last, and when did you finally emerge with your first full-time medical job?
Yeah, I think the years of orderly work were very helpful because I mastered a lot of different skills, even as an orderly, that served me when I became a medical student. So after finishing medical school, there's a process of matching students to their training for further training through a lottery system. And I chose to apply for internal medicine training, which involved me traveling around the country on an Eastern airline, all you can fly pass for 6 weeks. And I took a big sweep of the country, visiting residency programs that I had applied to and doing interviews. And it was a really great experience. I went up to the Northwest, down I stopped in the Midwest, then to the Northwest, down through California, Southern California, and then came back through the Southern United States and ended up back in North Carolina. And they rolled the dice and the lottery went in, and I matched at Dartmouth Medical Center in Hanover, New Hampshire. That's how I ended up there. It wasn't my first choice. It was my yeah, I think it was my third choice. But there I was, from the deep south to northeast and up in New England. 3 years in Hanover.
So after that residency was over, what was next?
Um, During residency, I developed an interest in research, and I conducted a study as a senior resident, my last year at Dartmouth, working with a professor and a MD and an epidemiologist. We were studying whether men who had heart attacks had different hormone levels than those who thought they had heart attacks but did not have any evidence of this condition. And we compared their hormone levels, and I published a paper in a medical journal. Got very excited with the idea of including research as a part of my future career. And so I ended up with a so-called fellowship program, 2 years additional training in research at Boston University, where I also obtained a master's in public health, which exposed me to some research methods that I was able to use later in my career.
So then after that, what happened?
Well, I should mention that along the way, specifically at Dartmouth, as a resident, the dating scene becomes somewhat limited because the days are quite long and there's very little time off. And I remember saying to myself, I didn't want to be restricted to dating other hospital-based people, but ended up dating initially one of the nurses who I met during my rotations. And that didn't pan out, but not to be held back by this idea of not dating nurses, I ended up going out with another nurse, which could be one of the stories I later share. But when I moved to Boston for this additional training, my future wife followed me down.
And then what did you do for your career? Take us through your medical career up till now.
Yeah, after this additional training in Boston, I applied for a faculty position at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. It was in the area of general internal medicine. They had a very strong educational program for residents, and it was very innovative, and it had a very charismatic leader. And I was taken on as a junior faculty member where I performed some research and I saw patients and I taught the residents in training. It's very, very satisfying few years. I was living in Boston. It was from I think it was actually 1986. I started there in Providence. And then in 1992, I left that position and came up to Boston, the hospital system, and took a job there as a faculty member at Harvard Medical School at one of the affiliated hospitals in Boston. And I've been there ever since. So from 1992 until now, I've worked at the same place.
Now, have you ever been an actual practicing physician, or have you always been more on the teaching side?
Well, in at Brown University, I had a practice as part of a group. It was called Women's Health Associates. It was an all female practice with yours truly as the token male. And that was because I was beginning to develop expertise in the area of osteoporosis, a bone condition that is more involving women than men. And so I was asked to join the women's health practice. So I had a patient population consisting of only women at the time. I also saw patients in the hospital, and that was one of my more active periods for being a patient-oriented doctor. But when I came to Boston, it shifted more towards research and less patient care.
So, over your career, has it been a mix of research and teaching, or more purely research?
It's always been more research and then teaching, administration, and clinical was a smaller percentage.
So, over your career, is there a highlight that stands out?
I think the a career in research was always I always felt like I made the right choice. I was always excited by the research and finding new discoveries, even though they weren't perhaps earth-shattering. Just handling the research projects and finding something new and reporting them and keeping abreast of the scientific developments was so stimulating. And I felt like I was contributing something above and beyond day to day patient care. Even during my research, oftentimes we would be enrolling uh, participants in our projects, and I would have to examine them and screen them. And there were a couple of instances where my careful examination turned up an unexpected incidental finding in the screening process that, in some cases, led to someone finding a treatable condition and being very grateful that they signed up for the research project and then were able to take care of their problem without any premature bad outcomes. So that was very satisfying, as well as the research itself.
Now, you ended up specializing in gerontology, and how did that come about?
Mhm. Well, when I came to Brown University, my mentor was in that field, and that definitely drew me in to a greater extent. When I had been in Boston as a fellowship trainee, my mentor there was also in interested in geriatrics. So I had early influence of my mentors. And when I came to Boston, I was right in the middle of an aging research institute. And so I fit in uh, because of my previous experience. So I sort of backed into it. I didn't initially choose it, but it's a really great career path because I was always younger than any of my patients. And geriatrics, it takes, if you have grandparents, if you're close to your grandparents, which I had three grandparents who I knew during my early years, you gain an appreciation for the wisdom of older adults and how rich their lives have been. And even though you may experience some depressing aspects of end of life types of events, it's a very, very rewarding career, and it takes a certain type of person to appreciate those aspects of aging. But then the longer I was in it, I found that I too was aging. And I was beginning to experience a lot of the things that my patients had been dealing with, made me even more interested in the field. And in the last decade, the field of aging has just taken off in the scientific aspects of trying to figure out why do we age? What is the actual biology behind aging? And that has really interested me in the last 10 years, I'd say.
What's a hobby or an interest that you enjoy?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, sports is still high on the list. So watch a lot of college basketball primarily, but also New England Patriot football was a very exciting part of living in New England. We live probably a half-hour bike ride from where the Patriots play. So to avoid traffic jams and attending live football games, we would just take our bikes there and walk into the stadium. That was fun. And every year I travel down to Madison Square Garden with one of my Duke buddies, and we go and usually see Duke play a game in Madison Square Garden. So this year we went down the first year. Duke lost to Texas Tech this year. It was quite disappointing, but we're usually there in the December, January part of the year when they play in New York. So sports has been a big part, and music continues to be, as well as grandchildren, which I have two of, or three to be exact.
Let's move on to the Fave Five topics, which include sports and music. What do you like to read?
Um, it's unfortunate that a lot of my reading has been reading scientific materials over the years, both for my research and to keep abreast of medicine. I also read the Boston Globe on a daily basis, some New York Times, and during the summer, an occasional book when I get away and spend a couple weeks on vacation, or during the winter months when I get away for a week or two.
All right, next topic is food. What do you like to eat?
Yeah, I've definitely, perhaps not as much as yourself, who I consider one of the premier foodies, but I like all ethnicities of cuisine and love the variety in the Boston area. And wherever I go, I seek out, as you do, the little places that maybe off the beaten path that have a little bit of a good reputation. I did get into Southern cooking, the unhealthy yet Southern cooking, but I do like grits. That's one of the things living in North Carolina, and my kids eat grits. So passed along. Not that grits are that wonderful, but I did always like grits and other Southern dishes such as barbecue. In fact, when I lived in North Carolina, I should point out, related to food, we once had a pig picking at our house where we invited a lot of people. And we actually we ordered a whole pig, and we drove to pick it up in this refrigerated butchery kind of place. And I remember walking in, and there was a completely prepared pig hanging from the ceiling, and it said Doug Kiel written in a blue ink. And I said, that must be ours. So my friend and I transported this um, barbecue selection from its refrigerated location to our house. And we also rented a large grill that was a oil drum with a grating on it on a trailer, a little trailer. And as we were rounding the last turn to get to our house with this barbecue grill and the pig in the back seat, the wheels fell off the little trailer and the grill started rolling down on the side of the road. We had to put the tire back on, and we did make it home and had a most successful pig picking where we stayed up all night cooking and then chopping the into chopped barbecue. Did about 25 heads of cabbage to make slaw, and had some hot sauce that we dreamed up. So it was a very festive part of my culinary
Yeah.
years in the
Did,
South.
did you make a red slaw for that?
No, we had a traditional
Okay.
Southern slaw. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I like other kinds of favorites. I do like Lebanese food. Love tabbouleh, which I make at home quite often during the summer, and like Asian food, Italian food, and there's very few ethnic foods that I don't like.
If I were to come visit you in the Boston area and we were going to share a meal together, where would you take me?
That's a very difficult choice to really pin it down, but there are a few local Asian places. I really one of my favorite dishes is the Korean dish called bibimbap, and I prefer the one where it's cooked in a stone dish that is heated very high temperature, and so the cooking continues even after it's brought to your place in the restaurant.
Hmm.
So the oak dole bibimbap is one of my favorites, and I would take you to one of the local places that has a very good selection.
All right, music. You mentioned being a musician, but do you have a favorite song or musician or album?
This is Jerry Garcia. May his soul rest in peace. And my kids got me this. I'm here in my office, and I have my Jerry Garcia doll here. He's got his guitar. I put him
Yeah.
on the shelf, and if I can take my computer, I want to show you two other things on the wall
Okay.
that address the music that I enjoyed, that I still enjoy. And you can see there's a Bob Dylan advertisement for Carnegie Hall in New York City, $2 seats in 1961. I was 8 years old. I did not attend this concert, but I've always been a Bob Dylan fan.
Hmm.
And then, of course, this is John Lennon. And of all the Beatles, he was my favorite. And among the many mourners on that terrible day in New York City.
Yes.
So my musical tastes are definitely in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, years. I have an extensive record collection, vinyl, and I have a record player, and also merged into the CD years. The streaming music I haven't taken advantage of the way you and others have on your Fave, you know, um, sites, your websites that you often have in the publications. But yeah, I still listen to a lot of the older music. More recent artists, I am a Coldplay fan. I really I like Coldplay. So
Hmm.
have most of the tunes over the years.
If you think back to the 60s, was there a favorite either single or album from that time?
My first album was Disraeli Gears, Cream.
Cream.
Cream's first album. And I bought this album in Canada during a Tenafly High School band exchange where we went up to Canada and played an exchange concert, and then they let us loose in the city one day. And I remember going into a record store and buying this Disraeli Gears with all that colorful artistry on the cover. And that is one of my earliest acquisitions.
I think that was their second album. I think their first album was Fresh Cream.
Fresh Cream, that's right. I never bought Fresh Cream, but I did buy Wheels of Fire
Wheels of Fire.
and some of the other later
I think
albums.
Goodbye was the next one. I think that was it. I think they just
That
had
was
those
it.
four albums.
Yeah, that was quite a super group, and I also had the Blind Faith album.
Right. Did you see Cream when they played in New York?
I never saw Cream, but as you may know, we made frequent trips from Tenafly into the Fillmore East. So over the years, I was a regular commuter into New York and saw many of the great rock and roll groups at the Fillmore East. And on a vacation with my family to California, I broke away and went to the Fillmore West. And I saw Jethro Tull at the Fillmore West,
Wow. Well,
which was,
I envy that I never got to see a show at the Fillmore East, and I would have liked to. But what is there a show that stands out from all of those shows you saw back then?
I can't say there was one that stood out. I do remember going to Randall's Island in New York to see Jimi Hendrix in a big outdoor concert. That was, when I look back, it was quite, memorable.
Was he any good on the guitar?
Yeah, he's okay.
What
I
was
do
the
have a
last
lot of
con
his
What was the
work.
last concert you attended?
Um, well, go to quite a few concerts locally, as you know, and one one that stands out perhaps is the NRBQ concert that I saw in a local town venue with some of our high school friends, John or Cheyenne Wilbur and Cheryl Shea. We all went to see this concert with some other friends of mine.
And that was at the Center for the Arts in Natick,
That was
which
TCAN,
was
as it's called.
which was the subject of another podcast with the director David LaValle.
Yes, it's so amazing these connections that we develop over our life, and to know that you were friends with the former director.
All right, moving on to sports. You indicate that you love sports. What sports do you enjoy watching? And do you have a favorite athlete or a team or a sports memory?
Well, as I said, Duke basketball is occupies a lot of my time watching sports on TV. So I think one of the memories I have uh, is the pass by Grant Hill, full court pass with a turnaround jumper at the final moments of that um, memorable Duke game with Christian Leitner putting in the jump shot. That stands out as a highlight in my basketball watching years. As far as playing, one of the highlights of playing soccer at Duke was that we went to the NCAA tournament one of the years I was a player. And this was with partially, just it wasn't a high scholarship kind of team. This was before big athletic scholarships came into play. And we played Howard University in Washington, D.C. at their field in our first NCAA postseason tournament. It was memorable. We were only down 2-0 at halftime. I think the game final score was 9-0, but we held our own in the first half, and it was a bit intimidating. All of the Howard players were speaking other languages other than English, and they were obviously they were born and raised playing soccer at such a high level. It was hard not to just watch them play rather than to engage them during the game. But to go to the tournament was a highlight. But playing college soccer was great too because we went on a lot of trips around the Southeast and we stayed in hotels. We had all of our equipment in the bus and we had managers with us. So it was, you got a little taste of sports at the college varsity level.
How about a favorite athlete over the years of being a fan?
Well, that's an interesting thing given the juxtaposition of going from New York to Boston. But before I, left New York and became a trader, I really was a Knicks fan. And one of my favorite players was Walt Frazier during those years where the Knicks had that stacked team with Bill Bradley, Walt Frazier, Bellamy, and Willis Reed, and Howie Comives, and Emmett Barnett, or was it no, it was
Dick Barnett
Dick Barnett,
and
and
the
and it was just I loved Walt Frazier. I
yeah.
used to I used to play in, down the street in Tenafly, and I would try to imitate. We'd go out after the game was over, the Knicks game. We'd go out and try to emulate their their prowess.
Well, two of the players you mentioned, Walter Bellamy and Howard Comives, were traded to the Detroit Pistons for Dave DeBusschere,
That's
and that
right.
really is what put them over and won their two championships.
That's right. That's right. They got traded. That's true.
Yeah, I was a huge Knicks fan as well, and up through their second championship in '73, I lived and died with the Knicks, and took me a while to then switch over, but that was a great time. And yes, Walt Clyde Frazier from Southern Illinois University.
Yes.
All right, our last topic is comedy. Do you have a favorite comedian or film or TV show?
I can't really pick out a specific person, although some of the shows really I on my Facebook feed for some reason I'm getting Archie Bunker episodes coming up, and that still cracks me up. Some of those All in the Family was one of my favorite um, comedy situational comedies that I watched growing up. I don't go to comedy shows too often, so I can't say I have a favorite.
All right. What about a film? Any film that ever stood out that made you laugh?
Well, actually, I was in love with Catherine Ross in that in the film with what was the name of that? Uh, I'm
Well, The
going to blank.
Graduate or Butch Cassidy?
Yeah, Butch Cassidy. Yep, yep. But I also liked her in The Graduate.
Okay.
So yes, she was one of my favorite actresses, I would say.
All right. And who is the best at making you laugh?
Um, I think right now my grandkids are the best at making me laugh. I have a 5.5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and the things they do are are very funny to me. We all had our kids growing up, but somehow when you get to be grandparents, you can you can feel differently. So you can actually laugh at what's happening. When you're parents, you often don't laugh. You might cry, in fact.
And
But
can you make them laugh as well?
oh yes, yes. In fact, my 5.5-year-old has said that Papa is so silly. And that's what gets me extra bonus points
Yeah. Uh,
and brings out the humor.
well, welcome to the Silly Papa Club, which I'm also a member
Silly
of.
Papa. I've gone from silly Papa, then the kids were getting mixed up between all the grandparents, so they had to come up with a mnemonic, like which grandparents are they? And so we have a cat, and so we were Kitty Papa and Kitty Grandma, and the other in-laws had a dog named Marshall, and so they were Marshy Papa and Marshy Grandma. But recently I've turned into Tootie Papa. Everyone is now Tootie Papa and Tootie Grandma. So it's kind of funny to see the evolution of who we are
How did
in
you
there.
get that moniker?
That I couldn't tell you. Think I think it's an early transition into bathroom humor,
Yeah,
which is a family trait, but
yep.
it's just very, very funny to hang out, as you know.
All right, it's time for a story. What would you like to share with us?
Yeah, I think I alluded to the fact that how I met my wife, Kelly. Um, I was in the coronary care unit my second year of a 3-year training program in internal medicine. And in that role, back in those days, you would come in, let's say it's a Monday, come in Monday morning, and you would stay in the hospital all day, and then you were on call all night, and then you would see the patients in the morning, then go home. You had about half a day to hang out at home, and then the next morning you come in and you stay all night again. So I was in the throes of this rotation in the coronary care unit where the sickest cardiac patients were admitted. And when you're on rounds, seeing patients, everyone is dressed in what looks like pajamas, but they're really called scrubs. And that's the outfit that is worn in the operating room, but people wear them all during the day. So, you're sort of tired and you're in your pajamas, and the nurses are in their pajamas, and everyone's just in a somewhat pressured environment. But I did notice a rather attractive nurse in her pajamas um, going around seeing all the patients. And one day I had already split up with another one of my earlier girlfriends, and we were in a patient's room. Kelly was taking care of the nursing duties. This patient was unfortunately quite ill and in a coma, so was not present in any sense. And during my examining the patient and Kelly taking care of some other aspects, I asked her out on a date. So that she always remembers that I can't believe you actually asked me out on a date taking care of a comatose patient, but there was so little time that sometimes you had to resort to these things. And then people asked her, who is that you're going to go out with? And she said, it's the doctor with the good handwriting. And everyone goes, oh, it's that one. I realized that I had developed a reputation for actually having legible handwriting. This was before everything was typed. And my reputation had grown not based on looks or any other aspects, but based on handwriting.
Was
So
that one of the reasons
I
that Kelly decided to go out with you?
well, I was known for that, I guess, but hopefully it was more than that. But ended up that we later got married.
Now, you
So
said you had dated a previous nurse and ended that. Did that complicate things at work? Did you encounter her after that?
yes, in fact, she worked in the cardiac step down unit. So patients would come out of the intensive care and go to that unit. So the two nurses did know of each other, and on occasion it did, you know, generate some discussion.
When you would encounter her, when you would encounter your first nurse, how would that go?
Yes, we parted on good
Okay,
terms.
all right. So was it
Yeah,
from?
my the first nurse lived on a farm house apartment, and so I would often go over and see the cows being milked, and there was this big barn, and it was actually like living on a farm and working in the hospital. So that was quite an experience.
How long after you started dating Kelly did you get married?
We got married a couple years in, and she had met me without actually knowing me very well because she had a big party at her house the year before that we formally met. And I was playing saxophone in a band who played at her party.
Oh,
It was a group of doctors that just played informally. We didn't charge anything. We were just hanging out, having fun. So I played in her house, and then later on realized that she was the nurse who I had proposed a date for on our over that comatose patient. So we had a musical interlude prior to a formal date.
God. Now, did the comatose patient ever recover?
No,
I
I
was
don't.
wondering if they recovered and they said, I remember
I
hearing
heard you
you.
ask around. No, unfortunately, I don't think that
Now, did you
happened.
have an impression of her from that first time playing at her house?
No, I really didn't get to see her that much. We were
Okay.
preoccupied.
And do you still play the saxophone today?
Stan, I'm sorry to say that that old saxophone is in my attic and hasn't been out for quite a while. The last time the saxophone came out was when my middle daughter was about 4 or 5 years old. We brought the sax down into the living room. It was a tenor sax, so if you put it on the ground, it came to about her height. So if you can imagine her standing alongside the sax and she wanted to give it a try. And so we put the reed on the mouthpiece and she took a huge breath and blew into the saxophone, and a very loud um, C came out of that saxophone. So that was the last time it was played.
And did any of your kids take up music as a result?
She took up piano
Okay.
for a while, but the other two did not.
Well, I'm going to wrap up with a quick story of my own. This is from after we had reconnected and found out that we both spent some time in Florida during the winter. So we would go down there for extended period, and you would come down for a week or two, as I recall. And we had connected at once. But one time we were over in on the eastern shore of Florida, and I had been visiting a friend of mine over there. And we were about to head back over to Bonita Springs where we were staying, and I got this text message from an unidentified number. And it wasn't in my contacts list. And the text message says something like, do you want to meet for dinner? So I'm thinking, who is an unknown person inviting me to dinner? And I was puzzling over this. And then I was driving at the time, but I asked my wife to tell me what was the phone number, what was the area code. And she said, well, it's a 617 area code. And I thought for a moment, I said, I think that's Boston. I think that's a Boston area code. So I'm thinking, who could that be? And then I thought, oh, wait, that might be Doug Keel. So, so I said, well, text back to this unknown number and say, yes, we'll meet you. Where would you like to meet? And see what response we get. And they came back with a response that was in Naples. So I thought, okay, that's got to be that's got to be Doug. But could have been we could have met up with a complete stranger as a result of this text exchange.
Yeah, I think you didn't have me in your contact list, but after that we got together repeatedly every year when you were down in the area on the West Coast. It was one of the highlights over those years. We had such fun
And are you
playing.
going back? Are you going back there this winter?
We are still
Okay.
going back there, and our children come down to spend some time. They bring the kids with them. So we have the grandkids and we have a lot of visiting. But we do miss you guys. I know you have West Coast tendencies these days.
Yeah, that's true. Of course, it could always change, but the future is hard to predict. But at some point, we would like to meet up with you in Washington, where we each have children.
Yes.
And then the other thing that comes to mind is I'd like to see you come join me at the Final Four, which I go to every year. And as a big college fan, you ought to be there as well. And this coming one, which is this year, I'd say Duke has a pretty good chance to be there. And so does Michigan, right? So it could be a rematch of the Final Four when the Fab Five lost to Duke on the occasion of their freshman year, 93, I think it was.
And it's in Indianapolis,
It's in Indianapolis this year. Yeah.
Lucas Oil Stadium.
Lucas Oil Stadium. Correct.
And Stan, you always get tickets by and large.
I
And
do.
how many tickets do you usually acquire?
I have usually acquired two. So that this year I've got two through the lottery. And my son will usually join me for the Saturday game, and then he'll often leave, and then my wife will join me for the Monday championship game. But I was talking to Roger last night because Michigan is off to a really great start this year. They're just annihilating everyone. And
Yeah.
I said, you might want to stick around for Monday this year because he's a huge Michigan fan. And the last time they were in the Final Four was in San Antonio, but the previous time was in Atlanta when they faced Louisville in the championship, and he was going to head home, and his friend talked him into staying. You got to stay. It's Michigan. If they're going to win, you want to be there. So he stayed, but they ended up losing. So it'd be nice to see them win. Michigan hasn't won since 1989, and Michigan State, my other team, hasn't won since 2000. So it'd be nice to see one of those teams finally break the Big Ten drought, which is now 26 years.
Yeah, Michigan's playing unbelievably right now. Are they ranked number two? So
They are, yes. I think Arizona is one and Michigan's two, but we could see Michigan, Arizona, and Duke, and maybe Purdue as the four teams, in which case that'd be a pretty good Final Four.
yeah, yeah.
Well, Doug, I want to thank you for joining me today, and I enjoyed our conversation and stories. And it's been great knowing you for the last 61 years. And so here's to more fun together over the coming years.
Thanks, Dan. It's been extremely enjoyable, and we had that hiatus where there were decades that we didn't stay in touch, but reconnecting has been so much fun, and I've enjoyed the time we've spent.
Appreciate it.